Today's conversation is going to be centered around trust. And what does trust mean? What does it mean to you? What does it mean to your partners? Um,
and how that works in the world of poly.
my name is Lily. I feel very excited. And do I trust myself? Absolutely. Pass it to Daniela.
My name is Daniello, and I trust myself on a very deep level, and I also have doubt at the same time.
Toss it to someone, honey.
I'm tossing it to Robert.
Hi, I'm Robert. I guess feeling relaxed, and yes, I do trust myself. And I will go to Bryn.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Mark,
Sorry, forgot.
and I trust myself, and I also question myself.
How you feeling? How you feeling?
I'm feeling groovy.
All right, fine. Hi, I'm Bryn. I feel awake because I just woke up from a nap, and and mostly optimistic, and I trust myself 95%. And what does it mean to me? Yeah, no, I've developed my intuition to the point where I stopped doubting my silly self and actually trust myself. I'm gonna toss it to Devin just because I miss you.
I'm Devin. I have a carrot in my mouth. I feel very excited as well and happy today. I trust myself about 90% of the time. And I'll pass it to Sharon.
Thanks, Devin. Yeah, I'm Sharon, and mostly good, but a little frustrated because I didn't have a productive day today. So it's funny because I think of myself as being trustworthy when it comes to other people, but I feel like I don't trust myself right now to do what I say I'm going to do for myself. So it's kind of a strange place to be. But I'm working on that. See, I will pass it to Adam.
Hello. Yes, my name is Adam. I'm feeling hangry and overwhelmed. Most of the time, I do trust myself. I really decisive, good instincts. When I don't trust myself is when it comes to other people's feelings and love. I can fall head over heels and then put this person on a pedestal, and then I'm all in my head about them, and then it's like, whoa, you scared that person away. You didn't love them. You just infatuated, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know. I'm confused when it comes to that. Passing it off to Ms. Bliss.
Ms. Bliss, are you there? Your camera's muted, which is fine if you want, but we can't hear you if you're trying to talk.
She said in the chat people are yelling around her.
Got it.
Oh, got it. Do you want to say in the chat how you're feeling today, and do you trust yourself? Fantastic.
I'll read for those who don't have the chat open. I am feeling great, relaxed. Yes, trust myself most of time.
Pass it to someone else, Miss Bliss. Thanks, Devin.
Mm-hmm. Gina.
Hi, I'm Gina, calling from Venice, and yeah, I trust myself most of the time. And I will pass it to, I don't know who else hasn't gone. Hunter, have you gone? Oh, Emily? Emily? I'll pass it to Emily.
Hello, I'm Emily. I am feeling bored with obligations, but excited for things that I actually want to do. And I can trust myself about 90% of the time. I will pass it to, can you guys raise your hands if you haven't gone yet? Minerva.
I'm feeling like a little snacky, but also I think I slept more last night than I've slept in a really long time. So that feels nice. Feel a little less crazy than usual. Trust is an interesting, I used to tell people that there was no point to lying because I know that I'm really good at lying, and I haven't done it in a really long time. I trust myself to be honest, but I've also seen myself be somewhat manipulative. So in that way, it's not on purpose. Like, it's almost like it's just kind of comes up sometimes automatically. So yeah, like everyone else, I mainly trust myself, but except for that. Hunter.
I'm Hunter. I'm a little tired and I feel slushy. And as far as trusting myself, I've learned to trust the intuition I get when I connect to my higher self and do my process and get those intuitive ideas of what to do next or where to go or how to react. And I learned to rely upon that when I do it. And I've learned to pause to get that connection when I need to make a decision or what to do or how to move forward. So yes, I trust myself in those ways. And I'm on my phone. It's hard to see everyone at once. Those who haven't gone yet, I guess Izzy, I-Z-Z-Y.
Hello. How am I feeling? I'm feeling better than yesterday. Do I trust myself? I guess it depends on what the subject matter is. And there are definitely certain things, my profession, I trust myself 100%. Relationships and I guess just like being in the world, like I trust myself most of the time. And I will pick, let's see, Dorian.
Dorian. That puppy. Affirmative. Designating. Travis. Flurry.
What? What's happening?
He's crossing to Travis.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, feeling productive today. I got a lot of stuff on my to-do list done and then some. So it was, I guess I didn't get everything on my to-do list done, but I did get a lot of stuff done that was not on the list as well. So I was kind of balancing. But as far as trusting myself, most of the time I'd say yes. But sometimes there's questions and contemplations that I might not. But it's kind of fun to be unexpected.
Pick someone else. We still have Shannon, Sasha,
Julia, Candy,
Antonio. Go ahead.
As you said, Sasha, go. One of them.
Sasha, you're on mute. You're still on mute, Sasha.
Do you want to hand it?
Oh, I can try to unmute. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go, Sasha.
It's on the chat.
Oh, it's on the chat. Okay. Fantastic. Still at work, so we'll be on chat. I'm anxious and curious. I do not trust myself unless it is about work. There, I'm 100%. It means that I'm scared of my intuition and myself, my thoughts, and emotions. Thank you so much, Sasha. I'll pass it to Antonio.
Oh, hi. And what are we doing? I just got here, so.
are going to do this. You're going to tell me your name, how you're doing today, and do you trust yourself?
My name's Antonio. Doing great. I'm actually just about to clock out of work, working remotely. Do I trust myself? Yes, I do. I lean into my intuition quite a bit. I always have this thing where if I have to ask someone how I'm doing in regards to something or what I should do, usually there's that voice in my head that tells me you know what you should do. It's more like you're waiting for affirmation from someone else or confirmation from someone else. So I do trust myself quite a bit. And I've found that in my decision making, either I'm going to learn something that I might not have been cognizant of, or I'm going to make a decision that ultimately serves me. So it kind of puts that to bed for me.
Pass it to somebody. We have Shannon, Jeff, and Jeff, a few others.
Jeff.
Hey, I'm Jeff. I feel pretty content right now. I'm pretty relaxed. And I trust myself most of the time, although I guess it depends on the situation. I think I trust myself most when it comes to I think I trust myself most when it comes to things around the I guess like anything, like the things that I'm really pursuing, like my passions. I trust myself a lot in those. I think sometimes when it comes to relationships, sometimes realize like, oh, might need to rely on others for a little bit of guidance sometimes. But yeah, I'll pass it to Shannon.
And then after Shannon, we'll stop so that we can get on with the rest of the thing. For those of you who didn't get to tell you how you were doing in your first breakout group, you'll get a chance to as well. Go ahead, Shannon.
Thank you. I'm Shannon. I'm feeling scared and curious. I trust myself in cycles, but over the last 2 months, I've realized that a lot of my major choices have been spot on. Where I live, the partner I'm with right now, keeping my job that I don't always enjoy, they're all working out really well for me. So that's helped boost my trust in myself. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, and then Gina has to do an intro. Thanks for the reminder, Gina.
I just want to thank everybody for coming. Really appreciate this. We love Daniela, Lily, and Devin and what they offer, and really appreciate your joining. As you may know, we offer these Zooms on a donation basis, and your donation makes it possible for us to do this because we pay our great facilitators to come out and spend time with you. So if you are able to do a donation, please, we really appreciate it. I know some of you have already through Eventbrite and really appreciate that. So I'm gonna just put the link here for the donations in the chat. And so if you are able to help, that would be beautiful. And then I just wanna let you all know that you can find the listing of the daily Zooms here, and that on Thursday night, we're going to be having a virtual dance party with the Dirty Beetle DJs. So I don't know if you know them. They're a Burning Man camp, and they're really great. So want to invite you to come out, and we're doing speed dating on Saturdays. And also, if you haven't joined the Kindra app, just want to invite you to do that. So yeah, thank you so much. And I'm going to pass it back to Lily.
So what we're going to do first is I'm going to share my screen, which means that everything's going to collapse on you, and it might blow up your computer. So if you want to just go back to the top so you can minimize it again, if you want to have control of your computer again. I'm projecting a code so that you guys can join, and this is where you're going to be able to see what it is that we're doing. And you'll also be writing into this. If you can't join, it's okay. You can join. You can just write answers on the chat if you would like. It is not completely necessary to do this, but it's a nice way for people to be able to to be able to all chat together so that if we don't hear everybody's voice every time, everyone gets a chance to be heard or seen at the very least. So you can join in here. We're going to do this one a little differently. We're actually going to start with a breakout room because trust is such a nebulous idea. And we looked up dictionary definitions and we've had moments of trust and we were discussing it. And I really wanted to farm from you guys. What do you guys believe trust is? Like at its core, what is it and how does it work in relationships? The slide that I wrote, I kind of want to edit what I wrote on the slide because I want to say, instead of asking just what is trust, like what is trust in relationships? As I was thinking you guys were talking, I really want to make it a little more specific. So you're going to go straight into a breakout room. What does trust look like for you? What does it even mean? What does that even mean? Like really, what does that mean? So I want you guys to tell us first. So right now we have 8 people. I think we have, let me see, 28 participants. So I'm gonna give you guys another second to join. If you also wanna join using a link, I'll give that to you guys in the chat right now. Cool. And you can also use that link to join. Perfect. Once again, this is not a requirement. I'm not grading you or anything. This is just my way of getting everyone to get a chance to participate and have a voice. And then I'm going to send you into your first breakout room at about 1 minute. And in your breakout rooms, the person whose name is closest to the letter H.
Yeah, exactly.
H is going to moderate, whoever that person is. So what you're going to do, goodbye, Travis, have a wonderful day. So I'm going to close this and we're going to go ahead and start. Trust and security. I want you to go to your first breakout room, and in your first breakout room, you're going to be in there for about 12 minutes. Everyone's going to have about 3 minutes to discuss what they believe trust really is. And then you're going to type it into the little response thing, and we're going to project it, and everyone's going to get a chance to hear it. So I'm going to go ahead and take us to our breakout rooms. Ignore that. Go here. Oh, I'm going to lagging like crazy, babe.
Yeah.
It's really lagging. Oh. There we go. That's what they should see. What screen am I projecting? I'm going to stop the share for a second, guys. Because my computer is really flipping out right now. We have to fix it.
Lily, do you want me to help put people in breakout rooms while you're fixing that?
Yeah, can you do that? Put about 4 people to a room and they have 12 people each.
Okay, great. I will do that.
Yeah.
Okay, 4 people to a room. Okay, I'm going to make that happen right now.
Thank you so much, Gina.
And they know exactly what to do in the breakout rooms, right?
It's going to be up on the Pear Deck, but I'm going to say it again. Wow, holy crap. Thank you so much for your patience, dear humans, because my computer is absolutely flipping out. It is just...
So you want people to talk about trust?
Yeah, what is trust to them? 3 minutes each. What is trust?
What is trust to them? Okay, I'm going to send everybody off.
The rocket ship has launched back to the main page.
So I have on the Pear Deck, you could do the Pear Deck 2 ways. You can write what you said about trust, or we had a couple people, I did the same thing, where they wrote what everyone in the room said about trust. And so I'm going to let you guys project and see that, because, you know, when it comes to this, we couldn't even begin to encapsulate all the things that trust is, because this is a philosophical conversation ultimately.
Yeah.
just as an FYI, the way we're doing the PolyTalks is we're alternating practical with philosophical. So one week will be like literal how-to lists, like how to do a thing, how to have conversations, here are sentence stems. And then the alternate weeks, this is the alternate week, it's more conceptual, it's more exploratory. Theoretical.
Yeah, and for those of you who were with us last week, or even both, but the last 2 sessions, which I would guess it's about half of you or so, last week was the practical, and we were working on how to ask for what you want and how to negotiate, and you guys had opportunities to practice in your breakout rooms with each other, and you also had stems, sentence stems, to be able to actually communicate with your partner or partners. And then this week, it's kind of a Tarantino quality in the sense that it's going back, which we hemmed and hawed. We discussed whether or not we wanted to do that first or this first. And the truth is, the stuff we discussed last week, a lot of it doesn't really work unless you have some of what we're talking about now, unless you have an established language and established trust. So that's really what we're getting into. So if you're just joining us this week, you have some context now as well for what we've been doing.
I'm going to share the screen. As I said before, this is going to hijack everything you're doing. And this is going to show what everyone's responses are about trust. And we'll take about 5 minutes to kind of read through and look slowly. Once again, sorry for hijacking your screen. And you can unhijack it by minimizing the Zoom screen. And I'm going to start projecting what people are saying about what they believe trust is. We have a question about prediction. We have trusting people to be who they are. So a lot of ideas about predicting others' behavior. Trusting is about being honest with self. You can be honest and speak the truth, even if it might be uncomfortable or hurtful, because you can both see the bigger picture, which is the health of the relationship. Mm-hmm. We have trust in terms of dialogue, consistency, clear guidelines and expectations. Honesty has been a big thing that I'm seeing. Authenticity. Trust is believing your partners will not do anything to harm any partners. It's only there for growth. Integrity, authenticity, and wholeness is trust. Are you whole within yourself? Does your relationship feel whole? Do you feel whole in the relationship and you step in? I think that's a big question about trust. In the room that I was in, we had trust is knowing. Trust is clarity. Trust starts immediately until someone proves they can't be trusted. Generally, I mean, there are people who grow up in heavily trauma homes, such as immigrant, low-income households, or abusive homes, where they're actually going to have the opposite experience. They will actually not trust until they've built it. And many people who don't come from trauma or who have cured their trauma will be able to come from trust in the beginning. So people kind of just start from different places. We have trust takes the time to knowing that you're defining things the same way within a relationship. Knowing what you want and knowing how to ask. Being honest with yourself and your partners. There's been a lot in here about honesty. Scroll up. A young child once said before being shot to death, "No, I don't want to be here." And trust is the opposite of that. Trust is like, I choose to be here. I choose to be this thing.
I choose to do this thing. I choose to live this experience, however it may be.
Exactly. Trust is like an onion, multi-layered. This is all your guys' wisdom.
Yeah, no,
We're not doing anything. We're doing nothing over here.
And it's so diverse.
You're doing it.
Nothing happening over here.
And we do have a question from Bryn in the chat box, I think for one of the previous answers. How do we know, oh, you want to read it?
Go ahead, honey.
Go ahead, honey.
How do we know if the hurt is for the growth of the relationship? Who decides?
That's a great question.
So this is a whole other thing where I have a discussion about, there's a whole other topic that I've developed around how do you know that you're working on the relationship? Because there's just the idea that relationships are hard and you have to work on them. And sometimes relationships hurt. And over time, I've realized that for me, relationships get to be easy. Sometimes I'm hard and I have to work on me. And sometimes my partner is hard and they have to work on themselves. But relationships totally give us a chance to see the things that we have to work on.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether or not the hurt is for the growth of the relationship or not, who decides? I think it's the person. I think each individual person decides, are we hurting ourselves to push myself towards growth? Or are we hurting ourselves to please one another?
Well,
and I think that's a very different thing.
Or are we hurting ourselves because hurt is what we grew up with and that's what we know and that's what's comfortable and familiar?
Exactly.
So yeah, to your question, you have to answer that yourself.
Yeah.
And this also goes into other things like, are you the kind of person that's in a growth mindset? In which case, you could actually see a lot of the lessons that come up as ways to grow.
And I think a big part of it for me, my input on this is to recognize that when there's hurt, that I get to look at myself and see where is that hurt coming from for me and how can I grow and work through that before I approach someone and point the finger and assign blame for the hurt, because ultimately working through it does benefit the relationship and everyone in the relationship.
Someone asks, can someone be trustworthy if they're not self-aware? My instinct is...
Well, in my and Lily's dialogue with each other, when we got into trust, we always kept coming back to trusting self. So trusting anybody else, anything that's external, the genesis of that inquiry is, it has to be self.
Yeah.
So,
so we wanted to go. So does anyone else have questions? I think I went through pretty much everybody's answers. Onions, security. The thing I see the most in common is honesty. And I think when it comes down to it, particularly for myself, this is, you can do it. Come on, you can do it. There it is. My computer's like, no. And then it skips the one I want it to be on. That's fine too.
Yeah, you hit it twice.
I know, I hit it twice.
And I can just quickly address the last comment in the chat box. I think it's important to recognize when there is projection, either from yourself or on the receiving end. And the biggest part of working through that is compassion and having compassion for your partner and for yourself.
I don't know why my computer's doing this.
For fun.
For fun. It's just having a great time.
Bonus round.
Bonus round. What is trust? So the dictionary says...
Let's do this. We're going to stop the screen share. And then if you're on Pear Deck, you can see it, which is great. And then we can start the screen share again. Because that I think is the issue.
That might be the issue. Wow, this has never happened before.
It's like disco version.
It's like what?
It's like the disco version of Pear Deck.
It's totally the disco version.
Yeah, I know. Disco. Maybe if I do that, sometimes it helps.
So we got some feedback that, I think one of the things that really benefits people from coming to a talk like this is to have as much interactivity as possible. So the idea behind this week is to actually not have us talking at you. It's to have you asking questions, you sharing your stories, and everybody getting to learn from everybody else. But we do want to have the prompt up here because it will benefit you to see that. So,
okay, so the prompt is up on Pear Deck. I'm going to try sharing the screen again and see if you guys can see it. But what is trust? The dictionary says it's a firm belief in the reliability, truth, ability, or strength of somebody or something. And so the things that I have found that really are key for my own trust are, do I know that I am always honest? Am I certain that the person in front of me will speak the truth? Do I trust myself to make decisions that are in my own self-interest, like keeping consistent cycles, sleeping, eating well, avoiding habitual or excess use of fill in the blank? And do I trust my judge of character? See, I used to do this thing when I was like much younger, when I was in my 20s, where I was like, there's 100 men in this room. I'm going to find the one that is not available for me emotionally. That's all that I want. And so I really had to work on myself to find my, to trust my judge of character. And I find that in relationships, one of the hardest things people have to deal with is, do I trust myself and my judgment of the human in front of me? And I think that's one of the hardest things. I like this slide. This is a cool slide. But I think what's more important and cooler is for all of us to discuss with each other, how does trust work for you? And any questions that you guys have about trust that you want to pose to us or each other.
I have a question.
Yes.
Go ahead, Adam.
Adam, sorry, it's not about trust. It's about what you just said. Sometimes my sarcasm radar is good, but I couldn't tell if you were being legit, like this is, you walk into a problem, or you were legitimately wanted someone unavailable. So it was like a challenge or whatever. The thing you said about walking in.
It was both. I mean, it was my unconsciously playing out the need to have somebody else's desire for me validate my existence. That was something I did over and over and over again. And it was sarcasm in the sense that I'm like, I was kind of exaggerating, but also kind of not. And it took...
Well, now you recognize it, so now she can be sarcastic about it.
Exactly.
But at the time, she wasn't.
At the time, it was just like, oh, look, I'm at a party. Oh, I'm going to hook up with this guy. And now I'm going to spend a few weeks afterwards trying to convince him that I'm awesome, even though I'm already married and don't really need more validation, but something inside me says I do. Like, that level of, like, self-insanity is real for all of us. And I didn't get to arrive to a point where I could really trust my partner until I dug up that stuff inside of myself and I was able to identify it. Because then I knew when I was creating patterns within myself that were detrimental to not only myself, but my relationship in front of me.
Okay, because when you were talking, all I was thinking about was trusting myself rather than the other people, more of, and it's not even like, am I going to cheat on this person? It's more of just trust about like, do I trust that my heart is calling for this person, or is it just physical attraction? Anyway.
Yeah, and those are great questions, Adam. So the last slide, it really, I mean, when we got into this as a discussion with each other, we realized that if you get into your analysis or consideration of trust, you could just be thinking completely about yourself, or you could be thinking completely about somebody else in a romantic context. And so we wanted to start ambiguously to see like what comes up automatically for any of you. And a lot of things have come up. So do you want to actually use this as a prompt for us to just popcorn around, or what do you think?
Yeah, that's what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I really, here's the thing. I really believe that my trust in my polyamorous relationship is directly proportional to how much I trust myself. Because in a polyamorous relationship in particular, you are opening yourself to the scariest thing ever, which was to lose the partner that you're with to another person. You have to trust that you are awesome. You get to trust that this partner in front of you is going to be honest. And you can also get to trust that if the partner were to betray your honesty, that you are self-sufficient enough that you can survive that. And that's a really scary thing. And that did happen to me. My partner left me, my ex-husband, and he left me for somebody else. And that was something that I got to truly confront. Like, do I trust that I'm going to be okay after this? And because we live in a a monogamonormative world, which is not a word, a mononormative culture, that fear is ingrained in us. And the fear that if this person leaves, it says something bad about me, then that's even more scary. So all of my issues of trust start with me. Furthermore, thank you for copying that into the chat box. Who was that? Who was that incredible human?
That's me.
Oh, you're the most incredible human ever.
I'm the one that has the slides.
You have the slides and you're amazing. Another moment about trust, and I want to add this one last thing, and then I want to open up fully for questions for people to ask me and him and Devin, and ask each other, and anyone can answer. This is totally open source. Sometimes the body reacts in ways that are not consistent with the logical mind. It's a place of hurt, trauma, youth, previous burns that is reacting, and we get to be honest about that too. So for example, Devin and Daniela have been together for a year. They went off on a trip together, their first trip without me, to Portland for 4 days. Logically, I have 100% confidence that neither of them is going to leave me. Nothing terrible is going to happen from this situation. It's all going to be fine. But my body still reacted with this fear that something bad was going to happen because my ex-husband left me for another woman. And that was okay. I got to trust my mind, and I got to sit with my body and just be like, oh, this is happening. I'm nervous. I'm scared. I'm not going to tell them that. I'll tell them that when they get home. And then when they got home, everything was totally fine. And then my body got to go, oh, I can trust my mind again. I can trust them again. And that hurdle was overcome, and now I don't fear it at all anymore. So
I have a little tiny tidbit to add too.
Yeah.
That not only was it all fine, but you sharing that opened up this beautiful conversation where we got to share things that may not have come up otherwise, like how every 20 minutes when we were out and about in town, I was saying how Lily would like this and that, and like everything was reminding me of you, and just giving a space for more affirmation in your honesty, through your honesty.
Which goes back to the idea that trust is about honesty. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up at this point completely. Does anyone have questions about trust you want to ask ourselves and each other? And I'm going to turn off my screen share as well so that people can see me, can see us, and we can all see each other. Bryn, I can't hear you if you're speaking. Do I have questions in the chat? Ooh, there's a question. Oh, people spoke about vulnerability. Yes. Well, if no one has questions about trust. Oh.
I have a question.
Wonderful.
How about if somebody breaks your trust, do you have advice on how to rebuild trust once it's broken? Is that possible?
Oh, yeah, it totally is. There's lots of kind of like different levels to that.
Yeah,
The first
different
is
levels of severity.
There's different levels of severity. First of all, so a lot of times what comes with the concept of polyamory are rules. People often ask us, so like, what are your rules? And what I've learned is rules are directly proportional to how secure I feel in my relationship. The more secure I feel, the less rules I happen to have. And also rules symbolize something. Trust symbolizes something. So my best example of that is when my ex-husband and I first got married. There was like a year or two that we spent where I didn't want him to share our marital bed with any other person, because that bed was a symbol of our unity. That bed was a symbol of our sacredness. And that was how I upheld the sacred, was by creating the rule around the bed. And I realized it. They were reflections of each other. I'm going to say something that's really probably radical. I don't think rules create trust. Rules reflect the trust that you already have. And so when you create a rule, you've got to figure out what's underpinning that rule. And some rules are obvious, like use condoms. That's a really good rule, right? But what's really underpinning the idea of using condoms? It is, you respect my body, you want to keep yourself safe, the safety of your partner and my safety is more important than your self-pleasuring. That's what using condoms really is about. Mm-hmm. And so if someone violates the trust, let's say, of using condoms, which is a pretty big violation, by the way, then you got to decide, okay, what about the underpinnings about this violation of trust are you unwilling to follow? What does that mean for you? And what does it mean for me that you didn't use the condom? And is this the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time? Is it the first time you haven't used it? Because sometimes we test the waters of trust. We're like, oh, is that what it is? Oh, is that it? And you test it once and you're like, oh, that's what that means. And then you've got some definition. But you shouldn't test it more than once or twice, my friends. That's not cool.
Well, and also this might come back to Sharon's question, which has to do with rebuilding trust, which is, if you have some agreement and the agreement has been broken multiple times, then you get to decide that, do you want to, is there a level to which you're just not being respected or honored or cared for or considered, or, the thing that Lily's saying, there's something behind that means something. And if that thing is eroded, or if it's not intact, it's not whole, or as Devin with her definition said, it lacks integrity or wholeness, then, my feeling about that is you can't stay on board.
But if you want to stay on board, you
have to be really, really clear
as to, because you want to make sure your value sets are the same, because some people don't value the same things. And so sometimes the violation of trust is because you guys don't have the same values. So a really good example here is Daniela can tell me, sometimes I didn't hear from Shogi, my ex-husband, that he slept with someone till a week later. And I didn't care. I was like, that's great. You wore a condom? That's lovely. Glad to hear that. Good time. Had a good time. Glad to know. And some people are like, you must tell me right away. You must tell me immediately that that you have slept with somebody, or you must call me before, which that's another one that doesn't personally make sense to me, but that's fine. Because what I imagine is you're you're just about to take off pants, and you're like, hold up, and you're on the phone.
I gotta make a phone call.
I gotta make a phone call.
Yeah.
I've never quite gotten that one, but that's the point. The point is that my value system is such that if someone gives me a few days to say something, it's just very low priority for me. And so I might take a few days to tell my partner, oh, by the way, I hooked up with so-and-so. I usually don't, because I'm really excited. I'm kind of like, let me tell you the thing. But you might meet somebody whose value system is different than yours, that they need to know immediately for whatever reason. And aligning your value systems has a lot to do with trust, because for some people, walking out the front door and not locking the door means you can't trust them. And I'm the opposite. I don't like my front door locked. Don't lock my front door. If I'm home, I don't want to have to deal with a knock on the door. If you're my friend, just fucking walk in. And that's another difference in value systems that, over time we've had to figure out. So if you really want to repair the trust, figure out what rule they broke or what trust they broke, and what does it mean for you? And can you get that meaning across to them? And does that person have the same values and same meaning behind it that you do? Because you could interpret them not closing cabinets, something really simple, as a personal affront. Or they could just be someone who grew up without, or they could just be someone who grew up without cabinets. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And to add on to that, you mentioned, is this the first, second, third, fourth violation of trust? And if it's something that's been repeating or not, I think it's another thing to look at is the clarity in your communication. And there might be something that you felt was really clearly communicated and really clearly understood, and it was your understanding that they grasped it and agreed to it, and that was the end of the story, and then the violation happened. There is, again, I'll bring up compassion, to have a bit of compassion, and don't immediately assume that it was done out of spite or with the intention to hurt you. Give some space for conversation to really get clear with one another and determine whether that agreement was completely understood and agreed upon from their part. And I've learned a lot of communication tools with Lily where you can have that conversation without really leading them into giving you the answer that you wanted, if that makes sense. But just giving an open space for them to communicate to you what they thought was the agreement in the first place, so you know where you're coming from, where they're coming from, because you might find there was some misunderstanding, and it's as simple as having that conversation again and really making sure you're both understood.
And Bryn wanted to branch off of this. Go ahead, Bryn.
Okay, now I'll unmute. I'm going to try to be as succinct as possible, but what you're saying, especially because you're mentioning cheating and exes and protection and the example of a condom, I was just thinking about some cases that have happened or could happen. And about the value system is really, really important to know what it is, but if you're already not exactly communicating in the same way, I realize that I've had somebody was in a relationship with, and I didn't know how to communicate with them. I thought I did, because they communicate in this really specific way that I feel like not a lot of people do. And so they kind of faked it enough so that in the general sense, you're like, oh, I kind of do, like, oh yeah, you understand me enough. And I realized that part of the problem was not only that I didn't know that they had a different love language and also a different communication style than I did. So they were embarrassed to let me know when we weren't communicating because they were afraid of hurting my feelings. But by the time we did finally get to that communication about something huge, which was protection, they didn't really have a good conversation. They were really defensive because their value is no, they don't want to use condoms because they trust themselves. They trust their judgment. And for me, that's not my value system because I don't necessarily trust who they're trusting. And what allowed us actually to get there was me not freaking out when they said that and not giving them the response that they were predicting I would give them, which is, how dare you? Like, oh my God, what's wrong with you? And try to change it. I had to realize, one, do I value this relationship enough to want to keep it? But also, do I value the relationship I have with my sexual health to stay in it? And so it was like, do I trust myself to have enough, to attract enough in my life to make a better decision for my sexual health? So that was one aspect of trust. Do I trust that my words have value and meaning and that I can set my own boundaries and say, no, this is actually not okay with me? And do I also trust that me saying, well, I'd like to use condoms if you're not using condoms is not a deal breaker? And if it is, I'm going to stand my ground anyways. So it's kind of like what you're saying reminded me of all those things. Like, it's not it's so many levels of different types of trust. It's, can I be honest? Can I be compassionate? Can I accept that what they're saying is not in my alignment with my value system? And can I still stay true to myself? So it's kind of what that brought up for me, that reminder of that time.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely knowing your value, especially with something as impactful as protection, which I think is an example that any relationship should have conversation about. Knowing it before you enter into any relationship and have that conversation is important, because that's something that you can draw a really hard boundary with. I feel like there isn't a lot of negotiation when it comes to something like that. I'm either a fuck yes or a fuck no.
And that has to do with the self-trust that you guys have said. You trust yourself, and and it goes back, I said, just to trusting self. Aaron had a question. What's your question, Aaron?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious, like, it was actually based off of your example, Lily, where you were saying, like, your body was feeling insecure in a way, but your mind, you had that security in your mind. And I feel like in new relationships or like dating, like where there's not that, there's not the mental security either, because it's just like it's a nebulous situation. But then my body also just gets triggered, so I can't lean on to I can't soothe it with any mental knowing, because that's not there either. So I'm just wondering if there's any advice around that kind of, yeah.
I'm wonderful at telling people exactly how they can make me feel better. So for example, it was 3 weeks into dating my now ex and my current roommate, Scott. This is 10 years ago. We had seen each other 3 weekends in a row, and the third weekend, he kind of got up abruptly after sex, and he left. And that felt really weird. I was like, oh, what happened? What happened there? I was like, ooh, what do I do here? And definitely didn't have that mental security yet. I still was like, did I do something wrong? Did he do something wrong? Whatever it was. And so I called him, and I said, hey, Scott, you leaving kind of abruptly made my brain tell me that maybe there was something I did wrong or something like this. Can you give me assurance that that was not the case, or just kind of let me know what happened, because this is how I'm feeling? And then he was like, that sounds great. I'm so happy you asked me to do that. I had no idea that left you that way. So being able to be super honest about what I was feeling created the trust between us, because I was able to just tell him, and we are not, absolutely 100% not conditioned as a society to be that vulnerable or to give each other instructions. We are not conditioned to give each other instructions. And I think if more of us came with a playbook of how to love me and just give it to somebody, then we'd have so much more success. And so much more trust would be created. We should feel so free to tell people exactly how we want to be loved. Because otherwise it's a guessing game, which can be fun, but can also be exhausting.
Well, even just in the instances of intimacy and touch and lovemaking, there's like some weird cultural, thing around not communicating. You're not supposed to speak. You're just supposed to do things. And I mean, like when Devin and I first became lovers, one of the things that her former partner communicated with me, he's like, "Oh yeah, she comes with instructions." And like that was phenomenal. That was really helpful. She was like, "I like this, do this." I'm like, "Perfect, done. I can totally do all of that." And I didn't make it mean anything. Like I didn't make it mean that I was a bad lover or something. I'm like, "This is great." Like I went from 0 to like, I'm a 99% student because you gave me instructions. So, that's like a really tangible example of that, I
think. Yeah, and that comes back to knowing yourself, knowing your values, knowing what your boundaries are, knowing what pleases you, and having the place within yourself and within that other person to communicate it. And I think that can also partially answer another question that came in about like what steps you can use to rebuild trust. It's part of having that communication, that conversation that addresses the breach of trust, coming out of that knowing you're both in full understanding of one another and having a new agreement that you can communicate where you're at along the path back to trust. And knowing that if a trigger comes up, that you have a safe space to communicate that so that it can be addressed while it's happening and not weeks later when it's been like fuming and stirring inside you where you didn't say anything because you felt like you already talked about it. Because we are humans, and it's similar to a consent conversation. A yes right now doesn't mean yes in 5 minutes, an hour. We change constantly, and it's okay to communicate that with your partner if something is changing the way that you're feeling around a boundary or an agreement, so that you can evolve together and move back towards that space where you feel that safety and comfort, and not make assumptions about where you're at or where they're at with it.
I have Sharon reposted something. There's so much good stuff going on in the chat. What I'm going to do, I have to send out the PowerPoints from the last 2 sessions as well. And I want to copy and paste this whole chat so that everyone can read, because there's such good stuff coming here. Sharon said that trust is rebuilt through actions, showing you can be trustworthy. 5 instances of being trustworthy can make it up for 1 breach, although I'm not sure how accurate that is. For me, if a person takes responsibility for their actions, sincerely apologizes, and makes a plan for how they will be trustworthy in the future, then trust could be rebuilt. For example, if alcohol was involved, talk about strategies for not drinking excessively in whatever situation led to the breach of trust. So that stuff is so good. Thank you for bringing that up, Sharon. Just the idea that actions really, really create trust. Perfect. And there's a couple more. Dorian said a couple great things. He said, it is necessary to soothe ourselves enough to be able to be our most adult selves in the relationship when a breach of trust occurs with anyone or anything. And being the most adult self has a little bit to do with the idea that sometimes our body reacts in a traumatic way to something, and we are like, I've suddenly turned into an 8-year-old.
Or a teenager.
And you gotta know when you suddenly turn into an 8-year-old or a teenager. That really is important. Does anyone else have questions to address our incredibly intelligent group?
Yeah, I'm curious, does anybody have any examples that they want to bring up? Oh, go
I
ahead.
have a question.
Yeah.
So I have the issue where I've tried to communicate, especially like you said, trying to tell them this is how I feel and stuff like that. And the other person seems to understand, but when the issue happens, they didn't understand. And then I then feel like I can't tell them again, or I shouldn't tell them again because now I feel like I'm nagging. But at the same time, I'm like, I said it and you didn't understand me because you went and did it, or you said, yes, I get it, and still didn't. I'm not sure. Like, at that point, how do you go about it? Do you sit down again? Do you try to explain again? Is there?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start off with this one, Sasha. So it sounds to me like you felt really clear that you had established an agreement, and then something happened where that agreement was broken, and now you're left wondering, you're like, wow, I remember us having a conversation and establishing an agreement, but it was broken, and now I feel like if I bring it up, I'm going to be nagging. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay, so what I would say is that, and actually this segues really nicely with what Dorian just said, which is that you do come back together, you do have a conversation, make sure it's not when you're both in any kind of heightened state from the thing. You know, like what we like to do is schedule like an appointment, you know, or schedule a meeting time to talk about something that's more serious. Be like, hey, like, can we get together and talk about some stuff tomorrow at 5 p.m.? And you both like, cool. So you know you've set some time aside for it, and you're not going into it from an impassioned space. And then you bring up, you say, so I thought we had established an agreement. You don't seem to recall that. So can we reestablish an agreement? It's just try to have a very neutral conversation about it.
And then that actually goes back to value sets, because if you said one thing and they heard something else, it could be your value sets. Like if you said, I need to feel safe, and they went, yeah, let's feel safe, then maybe you two don't have the same understanding of the word safe.
Right, which means then you get to actually discuss that a little bit more. Like you can say, this is what I want. Can you like explain back to me what I'm asking for?
What safety means to me. Of course, you always get into places of like, if someone continues to be that horribly inconsistent, that's maybe a different conversation. You know, all these things are incredibly nuanced and situation specific.
Yeah.
But if I was in your place, that's where I would go, is making sure that our values and our definitions actually align.
Yeah, and I would go to one of the communication techniques that you've taught me, which is the paraphrasing. And before you go to put the words in their mouth for them and say, oh, I thought that we had an agreement to da 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 da, and have them just go, yes. I would say, what is your understanding of this agreement? And give them the space to answer so you can find the places where either there was not an understanding or there is actually a breach of trust or a betrayal, that then you get to decide, is your boundary to try to work through this again, or is it to wish them well? I don't know how to put that nicely.
Dorian says, just because you told them clearly doesn't mean they understood it.
Yeah.
This is true. When they do not understand something, it doesn't super help to say it the exact same way, but louder. If they catch it then, it's like you won the Super Bowl by being dumb lucky and nothing else. Winning the Super Bowl by skill here looks like working through how to help each other understand each other. I have three, so paraphrasing, which is saying back what someone said to you, there's three different types, which I do not have time to explain right now, but I can do it in the next lecture. I could do it the next one, actually, because there's a way of repeating back what people have told you. One is paraphrase, one is organization, and one is abstraction. And if you can get to abstraction, then you really get each other. And that's one of the coolest things that I've ever learned in my leadership training, which I do for school. But I think I'll have to say that for another experience together.
And we're doing a podcast on it, so we'll let you know when it's, ready.
So yeah, I was curious, does anybody have any examples that they can bring up of like, for example, dovetailing last week and this week? You know, like, what is something that you might ask for, or you might have asked for, or you'd want to ask for, or negotiate in a relationship if you felt you actually had trust, like what we're talking about?
Or more questions on trust. I have to pee over back.
Mm-hmm.
Share something. So there was a complicated romantic relationship that I was involved in until recently. And this is also incorporating what we were talking about earlier with rules, where it was a long distance relationship, but we knew each other. We used to live in the same place, and then we didn't anymore. So then it became long distance. And so we had rules that were in place whenever we were together in the same city, But then we also had to rediscuss rules like after some time had passed and we weren't together, and then we got back together, and what those rules looked like from afar. And it was mostly around, like, it was an open poly relationship, and so it was mostly this rule around like sleeping with other people. And so initially the rule was just like, just tell me, within, it was like 24 to 48 hours after it happens, and we're fine then. But then, like, whenever we didn't live together in the same city anymore, I brought up that rule again, and I was like, hey, I would like to create like some more rules and boundaries in the relationship because we don't really have any right now. And so, like, this is one that I want to bring up. And so I was like, I still want us to talk about these things and like be very open. And he's just like, I don't care, you can do whatever you want. And I'm like, well, obviously, like, we can both do whatever we want, but like, I still want to have a conversation about it. And I'm like, and so I was coming at that rule and that agreement from a place of like wanting, of holding this relationship in really high regard and like respect and sovereignty for the relationship. And he was coming at it from a standpoint of like practicality, like we have to get tested for STDs, like if we're sleeping with other people, sort of thing. And so like he didn't voice that it was as important to him to have that rule about sharing that information whenever we weren't living together, because like, we weren't actually having physical sex with each other at that point. Does that make sense? So there was like, we had the same agreement, and we had the same value, but our reasons behind that value were very different.
Yeah, there's an example that I can give from somebody's share last week where they were talking about how they were in a multi-year, I guess the best way I could say it is an open relationship, because it was kind of like two-sided. For the female in the relationship, who was the one on here on the Kindra call sharing, it was she felt really oriented to polyamory, and she wanted to cultivate intimacy and closer connection with whoever her other lovers were. And he, I think, oriented more as an open kind of swinger, but like not playing with her. It was just like he just wants to get down, And there's no judgment on either of those models. But what occurred to me is that there was actually a lack of shared value between them, or even possibly a discussed value. So I'll now compare that against the way Lily and I do things, which is that a deep value of mine is that Lily is not just my partner, and I love that we use the term partner, I'll explain in a second, as opposed to like a girlfriend or something like that, because for both of us, it's a deeper level of camaraderie. It's a deeper level of trust. It's a deep level, like, she is my confidant. And she even introduced to me this idea years ago that for me to share with her about whatever I'm doing with another lover, it actually gets more to that space of like, she's kind of my best friend. No, not kind of, easily my best friend. And so why would I not just like immediately go to my best friend and share with excitement about this super hot person that I just hooked up with, right? So like, of course I would do that. So if I'm not doing that with my partner, then there might be a lack of shared value there. There might be I don't want to have that kind of a intimacy with you. And so the example last week, I think that's exactly what was going on. He had this don't ask, don't tell thing. And so she had this like, I want to cultivate intimacy thing. And I'm not sure how those things work together. Now keep in mind, they'd been together for several years, so they were making it work. But, to your example, Emily, it sounds to me like you need to have that conversation. You get to have that conversation in the future as to, hey, this is a value of mine. Is it a value of yours?
Well, they have the same value, but they came with the value from different places, which
Sure.
can also have a huge influence on it.
Yeah. I think in response to that, to clarify some things, that was part of, we were in negotiations about whether or not this long distance relationship was going to work long term.
Right.
And so this was like one of many components in those discussions about like whether or not this would actually work, and where our values were.
For me, poly has a lot to do with values, because and trusting that the person's values in front of you work with your own. And you know, we're gonna come to the end soon. I do want to share an anecdote. When Daniela and I got together 4 years ago, we planned the date. We got together on a certain date. Why we planned it is not so much the issue. He was really drunk. He's skunk drunk. He's like crawling on the floor, drooling drunk, right? In the best way.
I was crawling, but not drooling.
Almost drooling. But he's a wonderful drunk. Like he's absolutely amazing. But we're in the room together. We're like kissing, and he's like falling down. And he looks at me, and he's like, I trust you. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but he was like, I know that if the apocalypse hits and you're by my side, we will get through it together. And it occurred to me in that moment, in a way that it had never occurred to me before, that there are ad infinitum songs written about love and so few songs written about trust. Because love is easy. Like, I fall in love at the drop of a hat. Hat drop, new love. Hat drop, new. More in my 20s than I am now. But to really trust the person in front of me, to trust them with my life. Yeah, totally true, Bren. We noticed that too. We're like, hey, it happened. That was like, oh, that meant something. Because my ex-husband, I trusted almost about 95%, you know, and I trust Danilo pretty much 100%. I'm just avoiding absolutes because that's just kind of something I do anyway. But I do think that establishing trust in your relationship is actually far more important than being in love. Yeah. Because you can have a whole lot of love and no trust, and that's going to be a pretty rocky relationship. Or you can have a whole lot of trust, and then even if you fall out of love, then you get to trust each other to navigate that nebulous space with some grace. And that was part of, I think, what happened with my ex-husband and myself, was that we didn't have the most amount of trust, and as we fell apart, the love maybe is still in there, but the trust was gone, and that was really hard to navigate. So Dorian wrote a small essay on, just doing your own inner work, which is what it comes back to. Do you trust yourself? And do you trust this person in front of them to also trust themselves? Ultimately, I think it comes down to my ex did not trust himself fully. I really believe that for various reasons. And if you're a trusting person, and if you're going to be with somebody and they don't trust themselves fully, to really create this trust with each other is going to be really difficult.
Yeah. And I have been in a poly relationship in the past where my main partner I loved so fiercely with every part of my soul, body, heart, mind, and at the same time I didn't trust them, and there was a huge breach of trust that happened, and I realized through reflection on that it was because at that time in my life I felt very little self-love, very little self-worth, and felt that I just didn't deserve to have all of the things that would go into a super stable relationship. I was willing to accept that the fierce, passionate love was enough, and just felt like I didn't deserve that part of it. And the way that culminated was in a huge, very problematic breach of trust. And I got to see how I went through that experience so I could learn to truly love myself and value myself and put my values first and learn to draw boundaries and know that I did deserve to have that level of love with the trust.
Someone asks, does anyone have experience making relationships work when two parties have different values? I've seen mono-poly work, for sure. I think that you can have different desires, but you still have the same values. So for example, one person desires to be fully poly, one person decides they want to swing. But the value that they share, might be they both share intimacy, coming home at night. They both share honoring birthdays. They both share something within that. You know what I'm saying?
Or yeah, maybe they're, yes, Samaya, to your question, maybe what that relationship is cultivating is, retirement security. Like they're building their financial futures, and that's actually the most important thing. And so if one of the people in the relationship is like, well, I want to do this other thing with other lovers, and maybe they've got just a bigger, fatter, louder libido, they're like, yeah, that's fine as long as we keep building our empire.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I mean, like people, you can agree on a lot of different things, and it can look a lot of different ways. But yeah, so that was actually there's some good chats coming up here.
The chats are so good. The chats are so good. Yeah, it's got some good essays in there.
I kind of feel like, you know, when these things come up in the talk, it's almost like you need some time to like ruminate on it, to let it gestate. And I almost wonder if next week, if we actually start off with like people getting to sit on this and think about it and form a question. You know, maybe those who have been here the last 2 weeks, something that combines last week's and this week's, and something come out of that so they can actually ask, because there wasn't as many asks or interactive on this one as I thought there would be.
The conclusion that I'm coming to after having everyone put in their words and their ideas is that I think trust is 2 parts. It's trust in, well, 3 parts. Trust in self, the partner trusts themselves, and then your actions towards one another reflect those trusts and those values. That's what I'm hearing now.
Well, yeah, and one of the distinctions that come up too is, I mean, I heard I trust myself in my passions, I trust myself in my career and things like that. Like, I'm not going to mess that up because it's really important. What that means to me, like what's unspoken there, is I trust myself when other people are involved. But when it's just me, I trust myself less. You know, so that's one of those iterations that Lily's talking about.
Yeah. I don't see how. Yeah, in poly, trying to be poly when you don't like trust your boundaries, trust your values, trust your voice, trust your instincts, and the person in front of you doesn't do that either, that's when I think I see it always fall apart.
Yeah, and there's also the element of when there's more than 2 people, 2 people can have an agreement. So with us, for example, we like to say how there's the relationship between Lily and I, Daniela and Lily, and then there's the 3 of us together. So there's actually 4 different relationships happening. And I have understanding that there are agreements between them that don't necessarily apply to me, or between me and him or me and her that don't apply to each other. And we continue the conversation always, because there's always room to shift and grow and learn from one another. And also just, even if it's an agreement about the way we like something communicated, not assuming that because Lily likes to hear, for example, like juicy, yummy sex details and all the things that I would want that too. So, I have my own agreement to, like, I just need the bare minimum, and to, if there needs to be a gentle reminder in the moment, because sometimes we forget, I think I told Lily something, but I actually only told Daniela, or, it goes that way. Be like, oh, just gentle reminder. I don't like the agreement. I don't like to hear as much as Lily does. So we just be like, okay, clear. So it can almost have a little bit of comedy and lightness to it. It doesn't have to be like, I told you no about that. That's not my agreement. That's yours and hers. Like, I just go, haha, nope, not me.
Wrong person.
Yeah, wrong person.
Someone out and found the 3 types of paraphrasing, which is really fun. But I think we'll do that anyway. We'll actually practice them, because practicing is great.
I just noticed that it's 6:30, and I want to just, respect people's time. And I know that Lily and Danielle and Devin often can stay later, and people like to stay later, so we can keep the Zoom open. But I just want to let people know, because some people need to go at 6:30. And I just want to thank everybody who donated and made this possible. And I'm going to paste the donation link again if you haven't. That would be really great too. And then I want to again invite you tomorrow night from 9 till 1 a.m. The Dirty Beatles are doing a virtual dance party for us. They're great DJs from Burning Man Camp. And on Friday, Emily and Jeff, who are in this group, are going to be leading us in a grok game. And grok is a nonviolent communication practice. The game uses nonviolent communication practices. And so you should come out to play. That's actually going to be at 5:30. So just want to invite you all, and Emily and Jeff can tell you a little bit about it if you're interested. And we're doing speed dating on Saturday. And I just wonder, you know, the speed dating we're doing is sort of not clearly monogamous or poly, but if people want, we could schedule just a poly speed dating. So if that's something people are interested in, I can schedule something like that in June. So if you something you might be interested in a poly speed dating, just email me. I'll just get a sense of if people want that, and we could do something like that. Anyway, I just want to hand it back to Lily and Daniela, and I'll keep I'm hosting it, so I'll keep the Zoom open as long as people want to chat with each other. Because I know last time people were chatting for a while. So thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, you keep coming.
I'm coming.
Thank you guys. And I just want to say thanks for the fun podcast, Evan.
Yeah, you're
It's
welcome.
fun.
Yeah, we have more coming very soon.
It's so exciting. I don't know if you want to put the link in the chat for everybody, but
I did. If you scroll up a bit.
oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't see. But
Yeah,
thank
no,
you
it's
guys
cool.
for everything. I'm really enjoying this, knowing we can come chat about poly every Wednesday.
Yeah.
I'm taking notes.
Oh my god, your background's so psychedelic. I'm like, ooh, it's like a goddess in a DMT portal.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
You're like, how did you know?
The audio quality is remarkable.
Thank you. It's well, I could put that link in here too. I found it online through somebody else.
The background or the audio?
No, the audio, whatever microphone she's got.
My audio? It's my Apple headphone.
Like really good.
You just love robust female voices. That's what's going on there.
Thank you. Yeah.
I do have to bop off because I'm going to go record a podcast right now. But I wanted to say that I'm always open to having one-on-one chats, or if you want to message me any questions, particularly if you're of the unicorn species and want any insight from my experience. And I love you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, sweetie.
Love you.
I think Steph J is there.
Well, I think I just lost Lily. I'm gonna leave too, unless
you guys.
unless someone has a question. Awesome.
Oh, I do have a question. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's a quick, silly question that I've been wondering. What do you guys tell people when someone asks you, "Oh, are you dating somebody? Are you married?"
Yeah, I mean, like we're very transparent when anybody asks.
Like someone on the street.
Like if they see three of us together, like that moment.
No, they just want to know about you.
Okay.
Yeah. Quickly.
Well, okay, so here's the thing. I have to decide really quickly in a moment what kind of a conversation do I want to have with them. So if people are wanting to actually ask me about certain details of my life, and if I say, yeah, I'm in a relationship and I'm in this other relationship, like that means that it's going to completely sideline whatever they were going to ask me. And they're like, wait, what's that about? And so I can get into that, but if I want to have that other conversation, I'm like, yeah, I'm in a relationship. And then they're like, cool, yeah, and then we can have whatever conversation they wanted to have. Because it's still a little too, peripheral. It's still a little too fringe for it to not become immediately the dominant conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Any other folks?
No, thank you. I'm just waving goodbye. Thank you so much.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Adam.
I'm tapped out.
Next week.
Thank you. See you next time.